Well, it's great that we have a better understanding of CWD in Tennessee. We've got an opportunity and some new tools that we're considering to improve the circumstances, and just appreciate the hunters' partnership with us and helping us get samples and be better informed and keeping us up to date on what issues they're facing. We certainly want to help out in every way we can, because we certainly need them to be successful in this. We've got to work closely in partnership with them.
The award-winning Tennessee WildCast is on the air with the latest on hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. Make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
All right, hello everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee WildCast. Hey, thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. It's going to be a fun show today. We're going to get a CWD update from Chuck Yoest and Dan Grove. Y'all have met them before. They've been on the show many times, and we're just glad to have them to get an update on what's going on in the world of CWD and up there in wildlife. So Dan Grove is our TWRA UT wildlife veterinarian, and Chuck is our CWD coordinator for the state. So, guys, I'm thankful to have you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Thanks for having me. Should
be a fun show. Just get a few updates and see where we stand on CWD. That country came out there, didn't it? CWD. And but first, I want to recap the deer season for you guys. Dan, I don't think you do a whole lot of hunting, but you like to be outside. What'd you get into this past winter and fall?
Well, in all honesty, I spent most of my time working on CWD, working check stations and things like that, and just trying to enjoy the outdoors when it wasn't raining.
There you go. There you go. And Chuck, I know you got your boy out in the woods a few days this year, right?
Yeah, I got to hunt a fair amount this time, and my son and I harvested our first deer together. So yeah, real excited about that, and I was nervous about how he might react to that and whether he'd enjoy it, and he just absolutely ate it up. So
that's
awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So the gunfire didn't scare him and all that kind of stuff, and he had fun with it then.
Now, quick funny story on that was, which I put earphones on him so that he's not scared by the loud sound. But anyway, the second deer I shot when I was with him, he actually had a BB gun with him. Mm-hmm. He felt he needed that to be with him, and I remember I shot the deer, and I turned around and he was very upset, in tears, and I was alarmed by that, and I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? Is he scared? Is this going to discourage him from hunting? And he looked up at me and he said, "Daddy, why didn't you let me shoot it?" So then I was faced with, well, how do I deal with this without discouraging him? But anyway, I just said, well, son, your gun just wouldn't shoot that far. So anyway, so yeah, we had a great year. It's
fun.
Good. Yeah,
that's fun. I'll tell one on me. I got both my kids out. I got a 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. We got out in the woods this year, and I missed a small buck, trying to sit between them and a ground blind, and it was kind of awkward a little bit. But anyway, it was a fun season. They got to hear the gun go off and experience the hunt anyway. So
yeah, well, good.
It's good to get them out there. So no meat in the freezer for me this year, but
yeah.
You said you got 4 this year.
Yeah,
he'll lend you one.
I got 4 and just ate some of that for lunch.
All right,
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into to the CWD update and what all's going on in the world of CWD. We're going to show some maps on the screen, so if you're listening, tune in and go watch the show. But positive locations, that has changed. Some of those, a county has changed to positive, and some changed to high risk. And talk about the changes in the unit that's happened over this course of this season.
Yeah, so it was a real eventful season. If you recall that we found CWD last December of 19 or 18 rather, and we only we had very little of season left, so the commission expanded the season so we could have some more harvest and sampling, and that was a good effort. However, we had a really incomplete picture last year when the season ended, or the previous season. But so the season that just ended, we had an intensive effort, and our staff worked their tails off in their sampling efforts, and through those efforts we learned a lot over the last deer season. We're a lot better informed about the status of CWD in our state, and it's great that we're better informed. The bad news is that we have more positive counties, because we were looking there more intently, and in fact, we found it. So we're up to 7 positive counties now and 4 high-risk counties. And just as a reminder, the high-risk counties, we haven't found it there, but we found it within 10 miles of those counties, and that warrants special regulations for disease management.
Okay. Todd, flip it to that next map so folks watching can see those circles and kind of see how those high-risk counties come into play there. So let's rattle them off if you don't mind. Which ones are positive? Which ones are high risk?
Take it away, Dan.
Yeah, so last year, at the end of the season in 2018, with the extended season into early 2019, Fayette and Hardeman were positive to start off with. And then in the early season this year, after the early August hunt, as a result of looking at some clinical animals, we added a couple of counties. We added Tipton, and then the expansion a little bit further into Madison County. But since the season, we've had Chester County added. We've also had Shelby County added, and then Haywood County has also been added as a county that we've had positive detections in. And when you're looking at the map, that little pink or purplish line, however you see that color, that's a 10-mile buffer that we draw around an individual positive. And so what we're looking at right now, with approximately all the counties involved in the whole area, we're looking at about 4,500 square miles, or roughly 3 million acres, within all those 10-mile buffers. And that's just here in the state of Tennessee, because remember, that line does actually extend down into Mississippi, although we are seeing a lot more positive animals on the landscape than Mississippi is on their side of the border. And a lot of people ask us what's Mississippi doing for sampling? Based on the sampling that we've done on both sides, the numbers of positives and the prevalence that we have, it's pretty much the picture that we have right now. Is it's not just an artifact of us sampling more, or them sampling less, or them sampling more and us sampling less. It's actually given us more of a good picture, because both states have been looking at it for two good full hunting seasons at this point.
Yeah, and to be specific to what the high-risk counties are, those are Lauderdale, Crockett, Gibson, and McNairy. Okay.
So, and then just recently, those changed just a little bit. Later in the season, we had a change. This map was updated on the 16th of January. So, that's as up to date as we got right now. How many positives did we have this year, roughly?
So for this deer season, we're so far, in which about all the results are in now at this point. There'll just be a few more trickle in, but we're just shy of 500. I believe it's 489. 489, yeah. Okay. So, but it'll change by the end of the day as we get new results. So we could say it's going to be around 500. And we had 186 during the 18-19 season. So the grand total being about 675.
Okay.
For the 2 years combined, 2 year seasons. Yeah.
Yeah, and if folks, I may be putting you on the spot here, but if folks are haven't got their samples back yet, they can look for them to be back pretty soon, I guess. And how would somebody go about finding that sample? Just remind folks how they to see if theirs was positive or not.
Yeah, so we communicate those results through email or direct contact through phone, or if none of those are an option, then they would get a mail out. But we can, with the results, the final results coming in, within a matter of weeks, everybody should know the outcomes. And that we've sampled over 14,000 deer statewide this past year, so it's been a very, very large undertaking, and something that's is real successful for the agency. So appreciate people's patience on getting those results. There's the challenging thing about that turnaround time is there's only so much of it the agency can control. The bulk of the days or weeks that it takes to get those results is due to the processes at the labs that support us, and they're not things that can be reduced or changed or streamlined. So that's right. Outside of our control. However, on our end, where we can control things, looking at where we were last year and where we are now, we're so much quicker than we were, and there's some opportunities to refine that a little bit more. So we realize the inconvenience of having to wait on those, and wish we could cut it down even more, and we'll do what we can. But it's going to be an ongoing thing for folks to have to wait some amount of time to get those results.
And we can I mean, we had a delay in the weather, and the holidays kind of played a factor in some of our sampling efforts. And one of the colleges or wherever the samples are sent to had some things that backed them up a little bit. So luckily, we were able to find another testing site and help us out a little bit. So.
Yeah, well, there was a gamut of challenges that came along this year. One was a blizzard in Colorado that shut that lab down. And then, the holidays are a challenge because all those labs close.
And all the hunters are in the field, right?
And nothing progresses during that time. And then the sampling lab that we utilize was overwhelmed this year because they got a higher volume of samples from other states that they did not anticipate. They knew what we were going to send. We pretty much predicted that exactly. However, they had those other states sending samples in. They got behind, so we quickly started routing some samples down to a lab in Mississippi that really helped us out over the holidays because, I know people need those results quickly, and they helped us do that.
Cool. That's good. Well, let's talk about the incinerators. This year we announced that there's going to be a big one put in Fayette, right?
Fayette County landfill, yeah.
Yeah, and but there's also, we've had some smaller ones that we've been using on a smaller scale and been able to do some crematory or incinerator work, to break down these deer heads and other carcasses and things like that. So talk a little bit about what we're doing with these incinerators, if you don't mind.
Dan, take a stab at this, and then I'll follow up.
Okay. Short version is we're dealing with a volume reduction issue, right? Because we've got a lot of carcasses that either hunters are generating, the heads from our surveillance program, or the remnants from processors. And, there's concerns over that material ending up in landfills and things like that. So incinerators are a good way to reduce that volume. Plus, if the incinerator reaches the right temperature, over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, we can actually denature those prions that are causing the disease and render them inactive at that point in time.
Okay, good.
And so the incinerator programs are basically a way to design to reduce the volume as well as provide an alternative form of disposal for us. The recommendation still through AWFWA, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, for best management practices for basically these kind of things we're talking about, heads and carcasses and waste parts, is still burial and incineration are our two best options. And so we're basically just trying to expand that program and make more options available to us, basically trying to manage the disease on our side of things. Processors who are very much involved in this process, I think it's in that area, something like 60% of the people that hunt in those counties actually use a processor of some sort, so they're a very vital part of this process, and provide them with a mechanism because they can't operate if they can't get rid of their waste product. A lot of people don't think about that whenever you think about a business, but there's so many different parts to it that if one part doesn't work, then the business doesn't operate. And a huge one, whenever you're dealing with any food items, is to be able to get rid of your waste stream. And so we basically entered into these kind of, with these smaller incinerators. One was donated, and Chuck can talk a little bit more about that. And then one was actually purchased this year, and used them in a really small scale just to experiment with and see how much fuel it's going to take, what's the feasibility of it, easy to clean out the ash, and things like that. One of the unfortunate things with the smaller incinerators is they don't reach that 1,800 degrees, so you still have to do something with that ash to prevent those prions from being active in that ash. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to work out and figure out this year on a much smaller scale, because there's a lot of waste generated as a result of hunting and hunting practices and things, as well as just doing the general surveillance and things like that. So basically, these are just mechanisms that we have at our currently available to us to try and solve some of those problems.
Awesome. Yeah. So tell us about this one. This is the new one. If you're watching, you can see the ECO. I don't know what brand this is. I guess that's the brand. But anyway, how does that incinerator work? Do you how's it fueled, and what's the process?
Yeah, so we'll show more pictures. That is a portable unit, so it's on a trailer, and it's permanently affixed to that trailer, but it can be moved around. However, we don't plan to move it around. We anticipate it staying right there or on that property. So what's happening with that is I'm going to back up just a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
And explain that burial or disposal of deer parts is a major component of CWD management, because these carcasses, if the deer had CWD, they have infective prions in the carcass, and that could infect other animals. So how these are managed on the landscape is very important, and at a large scale, you need a good outlet for disposal for that to occur sanitarily or well. Or, it's a best practice for disposal for disease control, and we recommended at large scale landfills. Well, unfortunately, we got a surprise this past year, and there was a new policy by the privately owned landfills in Tennessee that they weren't comfortable accepting deer carcasses unless they've been tested and they've shown not to have CWD. Well, because of the testing processes and the length of time that it takes to do that, it prevented us, precluded us from being able to dispose of deer carcasses at landfills. It just eliminated that as an option. And, again, disposal is a big issue. A lot of these, there's a lot of processors in this area, up to 20, and they have dumpsters that they put deer carcasses in for the unused parts. And there's, these processors process thousands of deer, so it's a large issue. So in order to try to address not having landfills any longer, we had to develop a plan, a short-term plan and a long-term plan to address this issue. The long-term plan is basically focused on a large-scale incinerator that will be at the Fayette County landfill. Our commission passed a $1 million grant to allow the Fayette County officials to purchase one, to have it installed, and then it'll be operational to hopefully help fill that void that the landfill policy caused. Now, that's one component. Now, this incinerator that you see here, I'm finally getting back to the portable unit. What we're doing with that is we did a feasibility study to see if these smaller units, because they're more economical and because they're portable, there's just a lot of convenience to these units as opposed to the large unit. And we want to see if we, across the affected area, if we could have more processors and the agency and maybe even taxidermists utilizing these types of units at a large scale, then maybe we reduce the volume of carcasses that need to be disposed of. And yes, they won't be getting hot enough to destroy prions, but they reduce the material to ash, and then that ash could then be taken to the Fayette County landfill for final processing and denaturing. So
I like it.
So and it's worked. This first trial has worked fairly well. That's a 1,000-pound capacity. It held about 120 deer heads, and those are heads that we got through our sampling program where hunters dropped them off and asked us to sample those for them, so we did. And it reduces it down to ash. They're operated primarily, well, you might as well say they're operated by diesel. This unit is. Propane's another way they can be, or natural gas, they can be powered. So pretty much that unit is entirely operated through a diesel engine, and then there's also an electric generator that goes, or a gas generator that goes along with it, but that's primarily it.
Cool. Show some of the ash there, Todd, and see what it breaks it down to, and then we'll get back to some of those shots of the new, the one we rehabbed and was donated. But anyway, that's how it breaks it down. Pretty. I mean, that's a big change from what you started with.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize through incineration there's still chunks left. It's not just perfectly ash, because there's dense parts of bone that no matter what temperature you reach, they don't just disintegrate kind of deal.
Yeah. So
there's little chunks, but primarily it's ash, and it's like a 1 to 20 volume reduction, approximately that, whenever you actually do put something through an incinerator.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the one that was donated and that we're going to be using as well, and thank the folks that donated that. I don't remember who that was exactly, but our folks helped get it here and everything, get it to West Tennessee to be used. But
yeah, so you may have seen the picture Todd made take us back there of the unit that's on the trailer, and they're using heavy equipment to load and unload that unit. That's our staff. We were fortunate enough that former Commissioner Jeff McMillan, he donated that unit to the agency, and it was quite the effort to get that unit to West Tennessee because it was in the Bristol area. And if I'm not mistaken, do you remember what the weight of that unit was? How many?
These are roughly 8,000-pound units.
Yeah, well, apparently this unit was much more than that, because we were thinking that, and I want to say that it was somewhere around 12 tons or 10, something like that. But it was an amazingly
Sounds like a fish story.
Look at the piece of equipment it took to put it on that unit and to safely transport it across the state. That took some serious expertise and equipment. So
that's awesome.
Thanks to our staff for making it happen.
Our staff can do a lot. It's amazing what our guys can do out there. They get things done when they need to. Okay, let's jump back a little bit to the harvest. I kind of skipped over that. The harvest was declining a little bit this year. Tell us why, and tell us how hunters can help and what they need to be doing, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the stuff.
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at describing how the harvest changed from last deer season, and then maybe get Dan to shed some light on what that means for CWD. So we saw an overall decline in harvest across the state. So it's about a 10% decline. And, you know, we've been seeing a decline in the deer harvest over the last couple of years anyway, so it wasn't that surprising that we saw a decline. Now, if you look at the area outside of what we know is Unit CWD, so we had about a 10% decline there. But if you just look at the counties in Unit CWD, and those are the ones that had the specialized hunting regulations for the first time this year, and they're all those Southwest Tennessee counties that you saw there, or a subset of them. So we had about a 30% decrease overall in the harvest in those counties, and we had a slight decrease, in the number of bucks harvested. I believe that was around 7%, but we had a 37% decrease in the doe harvest there. Now.
And that was specifically for Fayette and Hardeman counties.
Yeah. Thanks for clearing that up. It was around 30% for all the Unit CWD counties, but for the most impacted counties, Hardeman and Fayette, we refer to those as the core counties. And so we saw a decrease in bucks, a decrease in does, and then just an overall decrease. Now that's not a good situation. We were hoping that harvest would increase in all those affected counties. That was maybe overly optimistic. You know, we were hoping that it would increase. We created new regulations to help with that.
Plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, they were great. I think they were a great package of recommendations, and I think that it was just inevitable because, you know, this is a lot to come to terms with for the hunters in that area. There's new regulations that are complex. They're kind of necessary evils, but they're complex. So people were unsure. They're unsure about the safety concerns of the disease, even though it's not known to infect humans. So with all those things going into this deer season, I think people were just reluctant and unsure. So, you know, we've seen from other states that they'll rebound. They'll get more confident and come to terms with the new norm and get more comfortable and hunt more and harvest more. So it's unfortunate that the harvest decrease. It was kind of anticipated, or actually we anticipated it. We were just hoping it wouldn't drop to this level, but it did. So Dan, kind of as a wildlife health specialist, what does this mean?
I mean, ultimately, when you stop and think about, there's aspects of this disease that are what we call density dependent. I mean, the more animals you have in the landscape, the more potential that you're going to come in contact with an infected animal, and that infected animal has that many more animals it can infect. So if we're not reducing the herd through hunting mechanisms, you know, and you've got a 37% less that you harvested this year relative to last year's.
Right.
You know, and if you look at that and think about that many more does are on the landscape this year, and they're putting out that many more fawns, and so they're more likely to have, you know, twins and triplets and things like that. It's just one of those things where that many more animals on the landscape, you're going to have potentially that many more infected animals. You might see your prevalence grow as a result of the population growing too. It's kind of it's a very simplistic way to look at it because it's a very complicated issue. But ultimately, you got more animals on the landscape. There's a potential for more disease spread and for even further disease spread as a result of being more young bucks on the landscape potentially with a decreased buck harvest. Things like that where you start looking at that, those don't help with trying to manage and contain the disease by having more animals on the landscape. So
what do we do then? Jason, we have to figure out ways to increase the harvest there. And if hunter harvest was not sufficient enough to improve things this past deer season, so that harvest needs to be supplemented. So we're trying to figure out the best way for that. One thing that we'll do is we'll recommend new hunting regulations in April and May to our commission to try to improve these circumstances. We're going to try to incentivize hunters even more to harvest more. We've got some new ideas for that. And then we're going to be working with landowners to try to get them to increase their harvest. And some of that may happen outside of your traditional seasons. So we're contemplating that. We're also considering these outlying areas of CWD. We call them sparks, but like the Madison County example, Haywood, Chester. If the prevalence is really low there, so there's probably just a few deer in that area that are diseased, and if we could go in and target that group of deer and harvest those deer, then at least temporarily we put out that problem, or we take that problem out or away. So we are considering doing that in partnership with landowners, and these are programs that we're considering. We're not sure if we'll take these steps, but they're options for us, and they will certainly increase the number harvested, which would be a good thing for this disease.
Yeah, and along those lines, just to kind of bring it back around, whenever you have those smaller areas, those more focal areas on the outside of the map where there's just one or two positives here and there, it is at a low prevalence, but it's highly manageable. It's not been on the landscape for a long time in those areas, and so it's something we can do to help prevent the spread of the disease in those areas.
Yeah. Guys, I appreciate it. A lot of good information. Sounds like we're going to be able to come back and do another one of these soon, and once we hear about the other possibilities for this next season.
Right.
It's been a full year. Now have a better understanding of it. You got to wrap up for us before we head out?
Yeah, well, it's great that we have a better understanding of CWD in Tennessee. We've got an opportunity and some new tools that we're considering to improve the circumstances, and just appreciate the hunters' partnership with us and helping us get samples and be better informed and keeping us up to date on what issues they're facing. We certainly want to help out in every way we can, because we certainly need them to be successful in this. We've got to work closely in partnership with them, so we appreciate their efforts.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys for being here, helping us make sure the public's informed, make sure they know what's going on. That's going to wrap it up for today. Make sure you get out there and chase some turkeys.
Hey, I got one last thing I want to say. I'm really proud of how the TWRA staff have risen to the occasion on CWD. It's been a remarkable effort. Man, they've done some great work, so appreciate them too. They
are great. They do great work. All right, turkey season is April 4th through May 17th, 4 beater birds, 1 per day, and the youth can get out there weekend early on the 28th, March 28th, 29th. So get out there and enjoy turkey season. They'll be here before you know it.
Yeah, I'll be out there.
All right, thank you guys, and we'll see you next time on Tennessee WildCast.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hey, it's all about Tennessee wildlife. It's what we do. Tennessee WildCast will be on the air again next week.